Hello, good evening, and welcome. I'm Simon Bestwick.
And I'm Gemma Files, and this, of course, is No
No
Darkness But
darkness
Ours.
but ours. Welcome to the third part of our discussion on underground horror. You can find a link to parts 1 and 2 of our talk in the description below.
So, back to where I was gonna go, which is archaeological horror. And archaeological horror often takes place underground.
Yes. And again, this is about digging stuff up and possibly digging too far and digging up stuff you shouldn't.
Yes, absolutely. It's like, there's this big lid on it that says, don't go down there. Oh, yeah, let's just blow it up. Crack.
Again, crossing boundaries and crossing boundaries, breaking a taboo, so it's sometimes not one you even realized you were doing. But as with so much else, whether you intended it or not doesn't matter. You did it, and now you're fucked.
Yeah, exactly. One of my favorite found footage movies from like the last 10 years is As Above, So Below.
God, yes. That one's amazing, and it's I like it. I mean, of course, a lot of underground horror does to fall back on the sort of, we went down somewhere dark and there's a thing and it got me. And As Above, So Below is something quite different from that. It is that kind of numinous experience, and it is that kind of, you go down up again.
Yeah, the Orphic journey. And, from the very beginning, I mean, I love the fact that the main character, Scarlett, is a female archaeologist who's also studied alchemy. She comes from at least a line of people who are interested in weird shit and how that weird shit goes together to form even odder stuff. And she really is, I think she is on an Orphic journey because she's constantly seeing, images of her dead dad. And the guilt is driving her to go down further and further towards the land of the dead. Sometimes you go to the land of the dead just to see the person who's dead. Sometimes you go to the land of the dead to try and get that person back, but that almost never works.
Probably never works out as you wanted it to anyway.
Exactly. But there is this real feeling that all places under the earth are kind of connected to each other. And so, you begin under the earth in Iraq, in a place that's in the process of being bombed. It's in the process of being brought down around you, and then you end up in Paris, going down into the Paris catacombs, and where you eventually find possibly the Philosopher's Stone, possibly the key to immortality, but then you go a little further down and you discover the gate to hell. And it absolutely is that thing of, you have to go through hell. If you're going through hell, keep going. Like, you have to go through hell to emerge from hell. And there's just so much to like about that movie. I remember people were really pissy about it when it first came out, but a lot of people have discovered it again since then, or have discovered it for the first time since then. And it remains one of my favorite weird little side trips, because it is so character based. You don't get with most, I'm sorry, I'm sad to say, you don't get with most found footage stuff, which you would expect you would, but no, you don't.
The trouble is for horror to work, it's so often rooted in character. It's so often rooted in the psychology of the people involved, and too often you get people who, I think the situation's improved a lot, but too often you would get people who had very little interest in character and only interested in special effects and other forms of cleverness. Like, we could mention I would say look at the Jan de Bont remake of The Haunting, but I suspect your response would be, no, I won't, and you can't make me.
No, I've seen it 3 times. The last time I did it on my own hook, I was like, it can't possibly be as bad as I remember it being. Oh, but it was. Oh,
I've seen it once, and I was high at the time, and a large part of it is a blank. But even the stuff the bits I remember seeing were, oh god, this is dog shit.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's trying real hard, and there's some interesting things in there, but they don't go in any of those directions.
I think I get you. I mean, in remake terms, I'm suspecting it's maybe not as bad as the Nicolas Cage version of the Wicker Man, but that is not exactly.
It would be super hard to be as bad as that. It would be super hard to, take something and fuck it up that badly. But yeah, I mean, the two things with the Jan Bont, the haunting, is that jump out at me are why would you ever go to that house? Because every fucking part of it looks haunted. It's like there's literally a room in the middle of it that is just there to freak you out. The revolving room with the fucking mirrors and some kind of strange ass. It's like, what is this for? I don't know why this is here. It's like, I mean, I think the house in the original version of The Haunting, the Robert Wise haunting.
Oh hell yeah! That's how you do it.
That's a really great. It's like, okay, it's a mansion, but it's not a ridiculously huge mansion that takes up like fucking 10 acres or something like that. It looks like a house that people lived in.
Yes.
And weirdness about it is like, what's this shape in the wallpaper? Why does it look like a screaming child's mouth? Stuff like that.
Did it come out at the same time as the Blair Witch Project?
Oh, I think it did actually.
I just remember one sort of article about sort of horror films that said both the remake of The Haunting and the Blair Witch Project have had their audiences screaming, intentionally with terror in the case of Blair Witch and unintentionally with laughter in the case of
yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
So, and the other thing that I found potentially interesting about it was the idea that the professor, Liam Neeson, was making up a ghost, and he was like seeing if these people who all are vaguely psychic, would produce a ghost if he told them that there was a ghost there.
Like in the apparition phase.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, finish that one. Oh my god, what an ending.
Oh my god.
The
apparition phase is so fucking brilliant. It's an amazingly brilliant book. And that is the best way to do that kind of thing. As opposed to Jan Bont, who just kind of like threw it out the window. And also, why the fuck would you ever, it's like, was he just like looking through a whole bunch of mansions that you could go to, and he was like, oh, that looks like it's haunted. And it's like, did you do no research? There's no fucking way it's not haunted.
All too often with and as I said, I think this is a situation that started to improve in especially more recent years, but all too often, I mean, it's that general kind of snobism that's directed towards all genre films, whereas this is bollocks. It doesn't need sod good actors, sod an intelligent script, sod sort of nuanced direction. What we need is explosions or tits or blood, or we need special. It's about it's about special effects and stuff like that. Whereas if
it doesn't seem to have any kind of, it doesn't need to have any kind of internal logic. It doesn't need to have any kind of consistency.
Whereas really want to scare people, if you really want to make a horror film that works, you look at something like Brad Anderson's Session 9, which gets right what The Haunting gets wrong. It is about the place, it is about the characters, it is driven by strong performances, it's driven by an intelligent script, which gives you rounded characters and gives you this sense of a place that's kind of working on them, and you can't quite tell where the supernatural influence of the house and their own neuroses and their own issues, where one ends and the other begins.
But again, I think it comes down to people who don't trust horror and don't understand horror want to explain everything.
Yeah.
They're pitching it to the person who doesn't actually like horror, who's going to be sitting in the audience going, what? I don't understand. Why did they do that? That doesn't make any fucking sense. La la la. And meanwhile, people who do understand horror understand that you have to leave holes.
Yeah.
There have to be holes in there.
And you have to assume a certain degree of intelligence and ability to make connections on the part of the of the audience. I mean, how many times have we seen somebody who is a mainstream artist, a proper artist, a literary author or whatever, who says who decides to write a genre, something in genre, and there's always this attitude of, move aside, plebs, and let me show you. I'm going to show you things. Let me show you what I can do with this. I'm going to do some evidence of this that you'll never even thought of. And it's kind of like, somebody did this like 15 years ago.
Yeah, and to be frank, it's always that person was actually crazy the entire time.
Yeah,
which is my least favorite type of horror. And if I think that you're going that way, I'm going to throw your book across the room.
Ideally, especially if you're on the other side of that room.
Exactly.
I mean, again, it's like I endured Neil LaBute's House of Darkness, which, despite having Justin Long in it, was awful. And it was kind of like, so the whole point of this is, yes, these women are vampires, and they're going to kill, and they're going to kill basically arsehole men, or men they consider to be arseholes. And that's your twist. That's the vampires, it's kind of like,
but are they vampires? Yes, they're vampires. Oh, but are they? Yes.
Yes, it's kind of like,
yes, they're fucking vampires, man.
For an hour and a half of circuitous, mumbling, barely audible dialogue. There's one interesting bit, which is like when one of the sisters tells a story towards it, which is basically tells you, and that's the only interesting part of the film, that you could just cut that out. That would have been the film. That could have been just had the ending. But it's kind of like, and now you're going to bite him, and now you're going to bite him and drain his blood.
That would have been the Brian Evanson version, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyways, archaeological horror. You're often going down into a tomb, or like a series of tombs. You're often going down under the ground. One of the most interesting things about that kind of horror is finding the right thing to riff off of. And, for example, I would love to do something about ground penetrating radar. That thing that they're doing these days where they're trying to figure out how big something was originally, and sometimes they find what they think are chambers underneath where the chambers cut off. It's like, how do we get down there? What is going to happen if we drill there? What can we possibly get down into what we think is a further part of the tomb, or is it just a cave? That might be interesting as well, ground penetrating radar, that would be amazing. So much of archaeology kind of crosses over with mythology anyways.
Yeah.
Let's face it, Troy existed. So it's not insane to examine local mythology and storytelling when you're looking for something archaeologically.
I mean, as you said, with like, our very first podcast when we were talking about, sort of frozen horror, and we were talking about the fate of the Franklin expedition. They were able. One of the ways when they were able to locate, the remains of the ships, was by asking people who actually fucking lived there.
Yes.
Not assuming a bunch of, they were a bunch of, knuckle dragging savages who couldn't find their own arse. It's kind of like these people have managed to survive in this environment, and prosper in this environment for centuries. Maybe they know something, and maybe if the Franklin expedition had actually, communicated with them, they could actually have, they might not all ended up.
Oh yes, I remember my great-great-grandfather used to tell me about that weird day when dead men came into the camp and we all just hid.
Exactly.
We were just like, fuck that shit.
How much horror ultimately revolves around this idea of, here's this old legend or this old myth or this silly superstition, and actually, hang on, it's not so silly after all. There is actually some real truth to it.
Yeah, exactly. There's a book that I had on my Kindle. Still probably do have it, and I cannot remember what it's called, but it's called something like Gods of Egypt. It's not Gods of Egypt, but Gods of something. And essentially it's like, let's go to this tomb, because if we go down far enough, we may actually get into the Egyptian underworld. And oh, guess what? We did. We ended up having to go through the entire Duat, the entire Egyptian Duat, which, by the way, is not a place you want to be.
No, I kind of, generally speaking, underworlds and lands of the dead are not places you particularly want to be.
Yeah, because, again, when you come up again, if you get to come up again, you are going to be completely different. You are going to be, you may not even be alive anymore. You may not even be human anymore. You will just be different, because there's no way to go through hell and emerge. Yes, come out the same. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I remember people complaining about the end of As Above, So Below, and basically going, well, what was the point of that? And I'm like, are you fucking kidding? It's like, she's going to be studying that shit for the rest of her life.
Yeah. I mean, whether you can, I tend to remember something Cameron Hurley said, which was, about a happy ending versus, what counted as a happy ending. And she sort of said, well, generally speaking, if the main character's alive at the end, I tend to think that's happy. I know if you've achieved whatever it was you were trying to achieve.
Yes.
Even if you don't necessarily survive it, then you can that can still count as a happy ending. Or fulfilled, at least. I think Martin Scorsese made the point. He was talking to Paul Schrader. He says not you being fulfilled is what's important, not necessarily happy. You could be miserable but still fulfilled.
Yes, absolutely. It's like, I did what I set out to do. And yeah, I realized that I would have to accept my own guilt, and admit to my own sin to get back up out of hell, and I did it. It was hard, but it's like, it's better than what happened to some of the other people. So
yes, again, it's another thing that so much horror is about. It's about being confronted with your sins, and sin is obviously a very Judeo-Christian will, but I think either in the sense of something you've done that's harmed others,
yes,
or the stuff within yourself, or the stuff you've done or thought about that you don't want to acknowledge about yourself, that you don't want to think yourself,
your shadow self. And that's the thing, you have to take your shadow and you have to take it inside of you.
Yeah, you have to acknowledge it, and recognize it, and
this thing of darkness, I acknowledge mine.
Yeah. There's a quote. I know it from it was. I used it myself for my second as an epigraph to my second collection, and it's the epigraph to a novel called The Chatham School Affair by Thomas H. Cook. It's credited to Lord Herbert of Cherbury, but I've never been able to find the verse it comes from, and it is, "He sees enough who doth his darkness see."
Yeah. Well, I think that's true, and there is this thing about autism, which is yourself, right? That's what you are alone because you are a species of one, and you don't, originally people thought that you didn't want to acknowledge other people and you didn't want to bond with other people. That's bullshit. You want to, but it's hard, and a lot of the time, the same way that people look kind of dead out on the outside, because what they're actually trying to wrestle with is feeling everything all the time, and not being able to shut it off. I think that's part of why I've always felt that if you know nothing else, Jon Snow, you better know yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and there's just so many people who don't want to know themselves too well.
Yeah.
You know? But, you know, it's like that to me is like, no, it's going to come and bite you in the ass. It's going to come up out of a hole and bite you in the ass. You know? It's like, so when you think about it, the entire underground can be like your subconscious. It can be your id. It can be all the parts.
Go down to the hole and face what's down there.
Yes,
Hopefully
you have to go down there and come back out again.
Or whatever's down there, bite your, and as you say, bite your ass, and quite possibly other things as well.
We were talking about how you know, in The Descent, the movie, Neil Marshall's movie, you know, you get this amazing group of very athletic, very daring women who bond as friends through, you know, setting these challenges for themselves: whitewater rafting, hiking, you know, and in this case, caving. But the thing that bites them in the ass is that the two most central members they share a secret, one of whom knows about the secret and one of whom does not know about the secret. And this guilt that is unspoken between the two of them ends up, you know, it's like an intersection of guilt in a weird way, because guilt and grief, you know, it's like this person is trying to deal with the fact that she was in a terrible car crash and her husband died and her daughter died. This person, on the other hand, is guilty for a completely different way and grief-stricken for a completely different reason as well. But they're stuck together. And because of that unspoken guilt and grief, the second person makes a decision that puts everybody in danger.
Yes.
And she sees it as, you know, no. This is just what we usually do, but squared. You know, it's like, this is this is real, you know, this is a real daring thing to do. You know, it's like, yeah, because you took us to the wrong fucking cave system.
Yes. Yes. Even like the one who's like, you protege, and he's like, don't try to put this on me. You know, it's
what did you fucking do? It's ridiculous. You know, it's like, seriously.
Nora Jane is fantastic. She was in the first. They did a worth seeing if you can. The first couple of seasons, anyway, if you get the chance. A Irish crime series called Jack Taylor, which stars men. There's a reason for a lot of people, but she plays the sort of the female detective who's his sort of partner in the in investigations and a kind of potential love interest. But for some bizarre reason, when it got to the third season, they didn't use they replaced the lead actress with someone who didn't even vaguely resemble her and had all the
very weird.
Yeah, I don't know what they were doing there, but
I mean, I understand that there are often like production oriented reasons for doing stuff like that, but I hope it wasn't just she asked for too much money, so we got rid of her.
That wasn't a good move, that guys. It didn't work.
It's not a good look either. Anyway, you know, it's like, you know, it's like this is an Irish woman and this is also an Irish woman. It's the same, you know.
Who could tell one from the other?
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's just going to be watching. Everyone's just going to be looking at Ian Glenn, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's
like swapping out Wunmi Musaku for Cynthia Erivo and just pretending they're the same person.
I mean, of course, I mean, some of that recasting thing, I mean, kind of goes back, I suppose, to the theatrical tradition when, you know, if you had a long-running play, especially, you know, if somebody had to drop out or left for whatever reason, it's like, okay, we just get somebody else in to play the part. But of course, when you're watching something like when it's on TV or on a film or whatever, or a series of films, it's much more noticeable.
Oh yeah. You know, it's like, am I insane, or is that a completely different person?
Yeah, and of course with actors, there is that chemistry. There's the, you know, the sort of the rapport that they build, and the it changes the whole thing. Depends on, I think, I was reading Anthony Sher's diaries about, I think when he was in the play Moliere, it was one actor played Bouton, who's like Moliere's kind of servant, who's like, and the guy who and another actor kind of took over from the part, and he said he played him completely differently.
Yeah,
completely different character, and so of course that's going to affect the other actor's performance. It all has that kind of knock-on effect.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like knocking out a pillar and expecting things not to shift to the side.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, dragging off topic there, but yeah, The Descent. I mean, one of the great things about it is very much a film. It's an all-women horror film. The only men who play any significant role are the crawlers.
Yes. And even there, one of the biggest crawler roles is actually a woman.
True. I did notice one of the lead crawlers is played, I think it's the actor Craig Conway, who plays the main antagonist in Doomsday. I think he pops up in, I'm not sure if he's in, I can't remember if he's in Dog Soldiers. I think he's in the beginning of Dog Soldiers. He's the cop you see at the beginning of Dog Soldiers who get ripped apart.
Oh, he is, yes.
So he's the bloke. So I think he pops up in a lot of Neil Marshall's films. Doomsday, I love that film. But anyway, sorry, back on topic, Bestwick. We're talking about underground horror.
Topic.
But I mean, great. I mean, Mariana Buring as well, who's always she's in so cracking genre films.
So fucking good. And so to see these women interacting with each other under pressure, being very different people, but all with that very female energy, which is not necessarily nurturing and supportive and everything that that we're told that female energy is, but just fucking it. It is pretty much a masterpiece of the genre. And when most people think of underground horror, they think of The Descent.
And you can hear the final part of our discussion of underground horror at the same time next week. No Darkness But Ours is made possible through generous donations from horror enthusiasts just like you. If you'd like to support us, you can sign up to our Patreon and get access to exclusive content, or you can make a one-off donation via Ko-Fi. Links in the description below. If you enjoyed this episode, please let us know in the comments, share and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the like button if you're watching us on YouTube. Let us know as well if there's anything you'd really like to hear us talking about in the future, and we'll be back with more at the same time next week.
As ever, I have been Simon Bestwick.
And I remain Gemma Files. And this remains No Darkness But Ours.